Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Congressman Dean Phillips. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be with you, Brittany.
You are a Democrat, you're running for president, and you have said that President Joe Biden has done a spectacular job for this country. So my first question to you, why are you running to replace him?
Because Joe Biden's going to lose to Donald Trump. And I think anybody of good conscience and character who cares deeply about the country and its future would feel the same about needing an alternative, because I'm a business person at heart. I joined Congress 5 years ago after Donald Trump won an election that put my daughters in tears the next morning, and I promised them I would do something. And this is not the time to sit down and shush up and get in line and wait for 2028. The time to serve the country is right now and meet the moment. And that's indeed why I'm doing so. President Biden's a good man. I believe that's true. He did save the country. He was the only one, perhaps, that could have beaten Donald Trump in 2020. And now he's among the only Democrats who I think could lose to Donald Trump. And that's indeed why I entered the race, to provide voters a choice. And I'm excited to do so. I intend to win. And most of all, pass that torch to a new generation of competent leaders, of good life experience and professional experience, who know how to work together and address the problems of the future, because they're coming at us fast and time is short.
You've been vocal about this. You said now is not the time to sit down and shush up. So I want to talk about how your announcement was received. First, by your colleagues. Let's talk about how they received it personally. Has anyone reacted to that, supported you in private?
Oh, in private, a lot of support amongst colleagues. Of course, the institution, publicly, Washington, D.C., MSNBC, Twitter world, that's a whole different world. But what I've discovered very quickly on the campaign trail is that's a big, big gulf between that world and the real one. And that is tens of millions of Americans who are rejoicing about having choices. When 70+% of the country wants neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden to be the two choices, that's part of what is going on right now in our country, a massive disconnect between Americans and the people who ostensibly are representing them in Washington.
Congressman, I've had the privilege of talking to Republican and Democratic strategists as well as voters around the country. And you are right. No one that I have talked to said is particularly excited about what it looks like to be a rematch of 2020. But I do want to talk about some of the things your colleagues have said publicly. Congresswoman Annie Kuster, she's a Democrat. She said this to Politico, quote, "It's threatening the success of the Democratic ticket from top to bottom." When you hear things like this, that you're a threat to the institution per se, what's your response?
Well, if I was down in a national poll to Donald Trump, like the president is, if I was losing in 5 of 6 battleground states like the president is, if I had historically low approval ratings like the president does, then I would understand why someone might say that about me. But if you want to be objective, I believe there's only one person who is posing a risk to the Democratic Party's future, and that is President Biden. He's a good man, but that is not what the country is telling us right now. And as someone who believes in numbers, politicians lie. That's the truth. Numbers don't. And to anybody who would say that I'm the problem, I just don't understand that perspective, because I don't think I've done anything to hurt Joe Biden. I've only done something to help him. I voted for his policies. I was a member of the Democratic House leadership team that helped market those policies. I did not do anything to hurt the president. I've tried to help him. But the fact of the matter is, Americans, the people that count, it's not Congresswoman Kuster, it's not anybody in Washington that really matters right now. It's people who vote. Thank goodness, because we live in a democracy. So what I really care about is not what people in the Washington Beltway are saying. What I care about is what people around the country are saying. And it's really clear. Life is totally unaffordable for most people right now. We have issues at our southern border and a national security crisis that is real. We have wars around the world. We've got an environment that is at risk. We've got gun violence. We have people sleeping in streets, kids going to school without food. We have no mental health care system. It's time for a new generation to take the reins and actually get things done. We're relying on people who've been in Washington for 5 decades, who are telling us that if you just give me 4 more years, I'm going to get it all done. Well, that's not what's happening. And I have respect for the people that have said these words, because I believe at some point they're going to see the light and recognize what's at risk. And none of us, not Representative Kuster, not Representative Clyburn, not anybody in my party wants to see Donald Trump win in 2024. So I would rather we unify behind that, ensure that we have the best candidate positioned to beat him, and then we'll see the light.
The economy, the border, foreign policy do continue to be top issues for Americans, regardless of party. You said you voted for President Biden's policies. 538, the tracker, said that you voted 100% in line with President Biden. So where do you two differ?
Oh, we differ on a number of things. And by the way, as you know, the president's agenda is not it's not that many items. I voted for the policies because I believe they're appropriate. First of all, there's no member of Congress that when we vote on bills supports 100% of the underlying measure. We have a choice to make. What's in the best interest of the country? And that's what I always do. And I do believe the president has done a fine job generally. But again, it's about meeting next moments. It's about meeting moments 4 years from now. And we're talking about, let's start with affordability. I believe Bidenomics is a disaster. The policies are good for the macro economy. GDP growth is up, wage growth and job growth is up, unemployment is down, but people can't afford their lives. Fuel is too expensive, groceries are too expensive. We're going to have a mortgage crisis as hundreds of thousands of loans transition to adjustable rates, which means people are going to get slaughtered with their monthly housing costs, which are already too high. I'm hearing this every day from people, and we do not currently have policies coming from the administration that will address these issues. I've got some big ideas. As for border security, this is a failure of multiple generations, multiple Democratic and Republican administrations that simply refuse to do what the country needs. The foremost responsibility of the President of the United States is to ensure domestic security. The fact is we have very little border security on the northern border, my state of Minnesota. You can walk across a farm in Manitoba right into our state. I'm not saying that's happening en masse, but we have a lot of adversaries around the world, malign actors who wish to harm us. And I think it's fair for anybody who's concerned about that. And I'm afraid that there has not been a Democrat or Republican president recently that has addressed the issue at the border, and more importantly, that has addressed the issue upstream from where the crisis begins, which is the countries from which the migration waves are coming. We're not using our foreign aid dollars correctly. That's another problem. Look at what voters in Ohio said the other night. Red Ohio. They want cannabis legalized, and they believe it is important to codify a woman's reproductive rights. That's another issue. There has been a failure for decades in Washington when Democrats had the White House, the Senate, and the House. The failure to codify a woman's reproductive rights is a massive failure. The fact that cannabis is still illegal, it's still classified as a Schedule I narcotic, is hypocritical, absurd. And the fact is, these are people, including President Biden, who have been in Washington for 50 years. That's all my argument is. It's time for change. It's time for a new generation. It's time to address issues like artificial intelligence, social media, reformations to keep kids safe, our country safe. There's a lot of work to do, and I'm just afraid the people who say they know how to do it have had plenty of time, and it's time for change.
Let's talk about that a little more. You said you have big ideas when it comes to both the economy and the border. Those are top issues facing Americans. The Biden administration did request billions of dollars recently for border security. So when you say we need to secure the border, what does that look like specifically? More agents, a wall? What does that look like to you?
It means barriers where necessary and needed. It means comprehensive reconstruction of our ports of entry, which are disasters. I've been to the southern border twice. Anybody who would go there, Democrat or Republican, would be horrified by old infrastructure that is insufficient, systems and structures that are woefully outdated, lines of trucks waiting to get into the U.S. to bring products made in Mexico to our consumers, lines of human beings sitting in the baking sun who come across every day. We should be deploying the highest technology, both for security and processing, barriers where necessary. And like I said earlier, when people only spend their time in government, I don't think they have the capacity or the interest or the experience to go upstream and actually tackle problems. And that's how we have to start looking at all these issues. We have to go to the Northern Triangle countries from which much of this migration is coming. I would build dormitories to keep people safe while they're applying for asylum in their country of origin. Right now, our law requires that they actually come across the border. Allow them to save their $6,000 or $7,000 per person, their life savings that they have to pay to Mexican cartels and gangs to get them across the border, keep them in their own country, apply for asylum. We adjudicate the cases there. We use our foreign aid dollars to invest in security, safety, and economy so people have jobs and security in their home countries. And for those that qualify for asylum, then we should bring you to the United States and welcome you. And when you come here, you'll have your $6,000 or $7,000 in your pocket that you can use to begin a life. Our policy is absolutely archaic. It is self-defeating. It's ridiculous. And I'm so tired of decades of people saying, we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. They're not. That's a perfect example of how we have to change this. And by the way, it's like I said, it's not just the southern border. We have a massive border with our friends to the north in Canada. I'm not saying to build a wall. What I'm saying is, in the 21st century, I don't believe that we're paying close enough attention to national security when we have Iran and China and North Korea and Russia all seeking to hurt us. And I think it's fair to say there's a likelihood that they have already sent people across those borders who are embedded in the United States. And if that's the case, we got to do something and not just talk about it. That's the difference.
To your point, there is a war in Europe now between Ukraine and Russia. There is a war in the Middle East. A, what do you think of President Biden's foreign policy? And B, let's say we have President Dean Phillips. How is it changing?
So I believe the president has done a fine job supporting Ukraine. I believe we should have been, I think, more aggressive with that support earlier. I'll tell you, though, it is working. It is difficult. It is a grind. Frankly, I have to be forthright. When President Obama and Vice President Biden were in the White House and Putin took Crimea, that was the time, if we really had the foresight and the strength and the courage at the moment to set the standard right then and there, I don't think there would be an issue in Ukraine right now. And that's the truth. Same goes with the Middle East. You know, President Biden has been in the Senate for 50 and in the White House a combined 50 years. 50 years. And we are in the same circumstance with many of the same people trying to do the same things that are simply not working. I think his policy in support of Israel is extraordinary, and I celebrate that. But again, we need new leadership in the United States. I believe we need new leadership around the world. Palestinians certainly need new leadership. And I also believe it's time for Israelis to select new leadership and pursue peace, because there is no way that Israel will be secure moving forward if we do not find a solution to ensure Palestinian statehood, opportunity, and security for both nations. And again, maybe it's not news to anybody, but the fact is, if you believe the same people who've been making these promises for decades are the ones that are going to get it done, I beg to differ. And my foreign policy is one that will be the strongest stick you could possibly imagine, walking somewhat softly, but being ready and prepared to address and meet the moments of the 21st century challenges. And I believe that China is a perfect example where we have to restore a competitive relationship. We do not want to create an adversary in a nation of 1 billion people with extraordinary resources and considerable intent, I believe. We should be pursuing peace wherever we can. That starts in the Middle East, certainly in Eastern Europe. And we have to prepare for a post-Putin Russia, a failed nation, a brain drain, a nuclear nation. And it's time to look at this chessboard far into the future. And I just don't believe that people in their 80s are the people to start tackling the problems that we, my generation and younger generations, will be dealing with here moving forward. It's not a difficult proposition. People have a choice. We live in the United States, and that's the whole point of this, is to provide options and to ensure competition instead of coronations.
Congressman, what's interesting in our conversation right now, in your previous conversations with the press, you keep talking about it's time for a new generation. People in their 80s aren't equipped to deal with these things. An NBC poll recently found 74% of voters either have major or moderate concerns, both about President Biden's mental and physical fitness to serve for the job. Are you one of those Americans?
Of course I am. And like I said, I have great respect for people of wisdom and experience. But you don't see leaders of Fortune 500 companies at that age. If you're a United States airline pilot, you have to retire when you're 65. You know, there's a reason, because we're human beings, that we don't generally see people in that age group in significant leadership positions. And by the way, Donald Trump is going to be in his 80s as well. This is not just a singular issue with a singular candidate. I revere people of wisdom. I was thrilled when Speaker Pelosi chose to hand the torch to Hakeem Jeffries, an extraordinary leader, a man I have great faith in and admiration. I've been fighting to see him rise to the leader of our party in the House and eventually Speaker for 2 terms. And what she did was extraordinary. She passed the torch. And she stuck around to provide counsel and mentorship to that generation who is ready to lead. That's exactly my proposition. I'd love to see President Biden play a mentorship role to the next generation. I'd love to see Speaker Emerita Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, Chuck Schumer, all these people that have been around there for decades, turn over the reins to a rising generation that has ideas, competencies, understands the future and meeting the moment, but stick around and help us out, because that's how America should work. But to entrust, well, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm speaking for the 75% of Americans who feel exactly the same way.
Congressman, would you go as far as to call for age limits when it comes to lawmakers?
No, because I believe in democracy. You should be able to generally make a choice. And by the way, there are many competent people who are older. I do believe in term limits. I believe that the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court need term limits. We already have them in the White House. There's a reason for it. I've seen how people behave when I know that their terms are coming to an end. They're independent-minded. Their character seems to increase. They take risks that they wouldn't before, and they act in a manner that I believe most Americans want. So I would have, yes, absolutely, I'd have term limits. I'd have 18-year limits in the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. It would make the institution work a whole lot better. But age limits, age caps, if you will, I think that's a little bit unnecessary, because the fact of the matter is everybody about whom I'm speaking would have termed out a long time ago if we simply had 18-year limits, which is plenty, which again, that's how corporations work. That's how nonprofit sectors work. That's how just about any reasonable institution, enterprise, or business operates with leadership. Because to have an operating entity that does well, you need new blood, new ideas, new perspectives. And when you keep people in the same positions, doing the same thing for a long time, you get what you pay for. And that's why the United States finds ourselves, I believe, in this period of malaise, of division, of discord. And it's time to bring optimism and hopefulness and a great new American century. And we're ready for it, if people make the choice.
Congressman, I want to talk about a choice you would have. Let's say you become your party's nominee, and that would be in a running mate. The Democratic Party often prides itself in its diversity. President Biden himself has emphasized diversity in both his staffing for his cabinet as well as his running mate. He wanted to make a cabinet that, quote, looks like America. Is that a promise you would also make?
In fact, not only will my cabinet look like America, my cabinet will think like America. And that means inviting people of great competency and backgrounds of all political perspectives. Because I think our great problem in the United States right now is there's this notion of the winner takes all, when the fact of the matter is the winner is only bringing about 50% of the country with him or her. That's why a cabinet should reflect not just the party in power. There should be people at that table who represent different opinions, different perspectives, different geographies, and different competencies. That's why my business experience, I believe, comes in handy right now. As it relates to both the cabinet, vice presidents, and populating the administration, I will make a firm commitment, the best and the brightest, period. I'm really tired of people who pre-announce how they will select somebody simply based on how someone looks, how someone prays, how someone thinks, or how someone eats. Literally, that's what we're doing right now. I want the best and brightest. And yes, my cabinet will be diverse of opinion, of color, of race, of religion, of background and geography and politics. That's what we need in the White House. And mark my words, we can change the course of the country if people know that their voice is being heard by their president in their White House. Nobody's done this in recent history. It's time to try it differently. And I make that commitment and I make that promise.
Let's talk about that a little further. From what you just said, it sounded like you're committing to including Republicans in your cabinet. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think it's absurd. I think it's absurd that we have American presidents who populate their cabinet with people who think entirely the same way. That is the recipe for what we have right now. And by the way, if people believe that is the recipe for success, and you look around and you think everything is going just great in America and around the world, then we just have a difference of opinion. I believe it's time to do exactly what Abraham Lincoln did. He had a team of rivals. In that era, people who saw things quite differently. They were his competitors before, but they unified around protecting, preserving, and promoting the United States of America. And the answer is absolutely. I will have different political perspectives at my table, because that will make me a better president, to know that there are people of a diversity of backgrounds and opinions who have my ear, who can make their case, and most of all, to ensure that literally 150 million Americans know that there are people in the White House representing them with their president. Nobody's done that recently, and I think it's time to change that. I will surely have a Democrat as a vice president because I believe in that capacity it is important. If a Democrat wins the White House, I do believe the ticket should be both the same party. The cabinet should be comprised of extraordinary people on both sides of the aisle, of competency, who have experience running organizations, who understand the primary responsibility is customer service to those that we serve. Right now, we're populating the entire cabinet oftentimes with people who are political appointees. Same thing we're doing with ambassadors, by the way. I'm tired of this nonsense where people who simply give a lot of money to a presidential campaign are suddenly appointed ambassadors. It's nonsense. And we're disenfranchising the best and brightest in America. That's exactly how I will operate. And that's exactly, I believe, what the country needs.
Congressman, as you know, many leaders in your party have excoriated what they believe is this extreme MAGA republicanism of the far right. So when you say you want Republicans in your cabinet, do you have anyone specifically in mind? Any names, any moderate Republicans that you would say, hey, this is someone I could see myself working with?
Well, there are so many. In fact, I think what the country really needs right now is the recomposition of a principled conservative party. The MAGA wing of the Republican Party is not just undermining the Republican Party, it's undermining the whole United States. When I saw, there are people like Liz Cheney, whose principled perspective, I believe, is one of the most astounding moments in American history, when she literally gave up her leadership post, probably a future speaker, to pursue principle and protect our Constitution. There are extraordinary Republicans who I have great faith in. Dusty Johnson, my colleague from South Dakota. I've got Anthony Gonzalez, one of the most extraordinary young conservatives who only served 2 terms and then retired because of this nonsense and dysfunction, from Ohio, an extraordinary man. Pete Meyer, I've found to be a great and competent U.S. veteran and man of integrity from Michigan, who, same thing, lost his seat because he did the right thing. I can keep going down the list of people who I believe are really outstanding next generation conservatives who have the intention that I do as a Democrat, which is to work together to bring our country to the future, and most importantly, solve problems, not play politics. I'm not in this business to play these games. It was not my intention to serve in this position to begin with. It is my intention now to serve as president because of the woeful state of affairs in our country and knowing what we need to do to get out of it. So the answer is yes. There are many, many more too, by the way. And I'm eager to introduce to the country a new team of rivals that will bring us to the bright future that I know we have earned, that we need to pursue, and that we will get to if we're ready to make that change.
I do not want to ask you about your vice presidential pick. You said it would be a Democrat. Do you have anybody in mind? I know you said you don't like the pre-announcements. President Biden did say he would pick a woman. Do you have any commitments and anyone in mind?
No, I will pick a person who I believe is best suited to lead the country, should they need to, before my term would be over, and who would be well positioned to do so in the future when I would term out. And that is how I believe every single leader in this country should be acting. Of course, I will assess everybody, and it will be a Democrat. It will be a person of integrity, of competency, of innovation, and someone who is not going to be beholden to this political industrial complex that has compromised, in my estimation, the very best people in Washington who come with integrity and then get eaten up by this machine of silence and of compromise as it relates to putting politics before people. And that's exactly the kind of person I will seek. And I promise you, it will be someone extraordinary. And that's, I believe, the measure of success and should be the measure of how we select anybody in positions of important authority.
What do you think of the current Vice President, Kamala Harris? Would she be someone on your radar?
Well, this is a perfect example of what I'm trying to explain to America right now. It is not my decision, nor is it my responsibility for the circumstances in which President Biden and Vice President Harris find themselves. My opinion is not what matters. What matters is the president has historically low approval numbers, and Vice President Harris has even lower approval numbers. Now, I've not yet seen a poll that shows her doing better than President Biden, and every poll I'm seeing right now on President Biden shows him losing to Donald Trump. So, I'm a man who believes in data, who believes in truth, who believes in the numbers, I do not always believe politicians because they say what helps them, not what helps the country. And the fact of the matter is, Vice President Harris and President Biden are deeply underwater as it relates to the United States electorate. That is just the truth. And I'm only here because I believe two things. They will lose to former President Trump, and we need a new generation in leadership because the current generation is simply not meeting the moment. Those are my contentions. I think voters are speaking pretty loudly and clearly about what they feel. That's what matters. But like I said, I will consider everybody of competency, of integrity, of experience, and the ability to get out of the political games and start getting into the principled games of solving problems. And the fact of the matter is, right now in Washington, there are fewer and fewer of those people that I see with the courage and the integrity to do what I'm talking about.
Congressman, have you talked to President Biden since you announced?
I have tried twice. I've called the White House twice to speak with him as a courtesy call to let him know about my intentions. Sadly, he did not take the call, which is his prerogative, of course. But I got to tell you, in the past, I've had a fine relationship with President Biden. I've hosted him in my home. I've flown with him on Air Force One and had an extraordinary experience and conversation with him. But it disappoints me that, again, we live in an era where somehow the integrity and courtesy of conversation seems to be going by the wayside. Like I said, I respect him. This is not about disrespecting President Biden. This is actually about the opposite. It's about protecting his legacy, preserving his extraordinary service in the White House, because I'm afraid if he runs again and loses, which I think he will, and all the numbers are indicating the same, is this extraordinary legacy and moment in time will have been wasted. His legacy will be one of losing to the worst man in the history of the United States, and all the great good he did will be forgotten. And I want to help protect that legacy, and that's why I'm running. But if I do not succeed, if I'm not well positioned after March 5th to continue my campaign, which I think we're going to be doing just great by then, but if not, I will wrap it up with grace. I will support whomever is best positioned to defeat Donald Trump, whether that is President Biden or somebody else who might enter the race as well, to offer the alternatives that Americans are clearly and loudly saying they want.
Congressman, before I let you go, I do want to ask about the campaign trail. You announced about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. A, what's a day like on the campaign trail? And B, what is that pathway to victory?
First of all, the campaign trail is amazing. Once you get out of Washington and start speaking with everyday Americans, first of all, it's inspiring, it's gratifying, it's beautiful. And by the way, it is really educational because the gap in what is being said in Washington versus what is being felt around the country is massive. I'm spending time at VFWs with Republican former veterans of the Vietnam War and wars since then, some of the most wonderful people I've ever met in this country. And we leave with high fives, hugs, and handshakes. I'm walking down streets into cafes and sitting down with young people who are so disgusted with the state of affairs in this country, the fact their voices are not being heard in Washington. I'm talking to homeless people right outside the door where I am right now in Manchester, New Hampshire, who simply want a chance to succeed. This is not rocket science. My day, though, starts with calling small dollar donors, the people who never expect to be called and thanked, appreciated, heard. I start my day with them because that's what this is all about. People who share $5, $10, $15, $20 with my campaign are the people who believe in the future, who are parting with a lot more hard-earned money than, frankly, people of great means are parting with as a relation to their total wealth and income. And those are the people I'm doing this for. They deserve better. That's why we have Trumpism. They were not heard. And I'm saying I'm the bridge to draining that swamp that you are so disgusted by leading with principle, with national security, and making America affordable. It is not complicated, but it takes people who are not part of this ridiculous and defeating system of politics to do so. And coming from the business world, the nonprofit world, and now spending almost 3 full terms in the United States Congress, I know what it takes. I've got the experience that no recent president has ever brought to the White House. And that's why I believe we're going to head to a bright future if Americans are ready to go to the ballot box and vote for change. I think it's time, and I'm that opportunity.
Congressman Dean Phillips, we have to leave it there. Best of luck to you, and you are welcome back anytime. Thank you for joining me.
I would love to come back. Keep the faith, and thanks so much.